The Great Hall of Velorix Prime was the largest meeting place in the known galaxy. Its walls stretched so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. Lights floated in the air like small suns, casting a warm glow over the thousands of delegates who had gathered from every corner of space. 37 different species sat in their designated sections, each one representing billions of lives and countless worlds. The Galactic Council had not called a full assembly in over 50 years. The last time had been for a minor border dispute between two small empires. But this was different. This was about survival. At the center of the hall, a massive holographic display showed a map of the galaxy. A dark red stain spread across one section, growing larger with each passing month. This was the Kathrani Dominion, an empire built on conquest and fear. In the past 10 years, they had swallowed 12 star systems whole. Entire civilizations had vanished. Planets that once held billions of people were now silent, their populations either dead or enslaved. The Varath delegate stood first. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, each one thick with muscle. His people were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and their fleet was legendary. The Varath Empire pledges 400 warships to this coalition, he announced. His voice echoed through the hall. We will not stand by while the Kathrani threaten our borders. Applause rippled through the chamber. 400 Vorath warships was a serious commitment. Their vessels were built for war, armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. The Ilmari delegate rose next. She was slender and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her people were ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The Ilmari Collective will contribute 800 vessels, she said calmly. Our technology is superior to the Kathrani in many ways. We are confident in our ability to turn the tide of this conflict. More applause, louder this time. 800 Ilmari ships meant advanced shields, powerful energy weapons, and tactical computers that could calculate 1,000 battle scenarios in seconds. One by one, the other species made their pledges. The Kelori offered 50 armored vessels. The Nexari promised 200 fast attack ships. Even the peaceful Tomari, who had not fought a war in 3 centuries, agreed to send medical frigates and supply transports. By the time the last delegate finished speaking, the coalition had assembled a fleet of over 2,000 warships. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Delegates congratulated each other, confident that the Kathrani would fall before such overwhelming power. Then a human ambassador stood up. His name was Daniel Price, and he looked utterly unremarkable compared to the aliens around him. He was of average height, with brown hair turning gray at the temples and a calm expression on his face. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for about 80 years. They were considered young, inexperienced, and frankly unimportant in the grand scheme of things. The hall grew quiet as Daniel walked to the speaking platform. Some delegates looked curious. Others looked bored. A few whispered to each other, wondering why the humans were even bothering to speak. On behalf of Earth and her colonies, Daniel said in a clear, steady voice, I am here to announce our contribution to this coalition. He paused for a moment. Looking around the vast chamber, humanity will send 1 ship. Silence fell over the hall. Then, slowly, laughter began to spread. It started with a few chuckles from the back rows, then grew louder until it filled the entire chamber. Delegates from a dozen different species were openly mocking the human ambassador. Admiral Zethrix of the Varath rose from his seat, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. 1 ship? He repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Is this a joke? We are facing the greatest threat this galaxy has ever known, and humans offer us 1 ship? Perhaps they do not have more to give, the Ilmari delegate suggested with a thin smile. Their species is young. Their resources are limited. We should not expect too much from them. Or perhaps they simply lack courage, another delegate added. Humans have never fought a real war. They do not understand what is at stake. Daniel stood quietly through all of this, his expression unchanged. When the laughter finally died down, he spoke again. One ship is all we have ever needed. More laughter, but Daniel did not seem bothered. He simply nodded politely and returned to his seat. The assembly moved on to other matters, and the human contribution was quickly forgotten. Far across the galaxy, aboard a vessel called the USS Var, Commander Katie Morgan received her orders. She was sitting in her quarters when the transmission arrived, reading through reports from her department heads. The Valor was one of humanity's newest warships, equipped with the best technology Earth could produce. It was fast, heavily armed, and crewed by some of the finest officers in the fleet. Katie read the orders twice to make sure she understood them correctly. The Valor was being sent to join the coalition against the Kethrani. Alone, she was not surprised. She had served in the human military for over 20 years, and she understood something that the rest of the galaxy did not. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not rely on numbers or superior technology. They relied on something else entirely. She called a meeting of her senior officers. Nathan Brooks was the first to arrive. He was her tactical officer, a quiet man with sharp eyes and a mind that could calculate firing solutions faster than most computers. He had served with Katie on 3 different ships and trusted her completely. Scott Palmer came next. He was the chief engineer, a large man with grease-stained hands and a talent for keeping engines running long past the point when they should have failed. He could fix anything, build anything, and improvise solutions that no manual had ever described. Dr. Lavra Hendricks arrived last. She was the medical officer, a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She had saved more lives than she could count and had seen more death than anyone should ever have to see. Katie looked at each of them in turn. "You have all seen the orders," she said. "We are going to war against the Kethrani Dominion. The coalition has assembled over 2,000 ships. We are sending one." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Just us?" "Just us." Scott let out a low whistle. "That is a lot of pressure for one crew." Katie nodded. "It is, but we are not just any crew. We are human. And today, we are going to show the galaxy what that means." She stood up and looked out the window at the stars beyond. "Every person on this ship carries the weight of our entire species. When we fight, we do not fight for glory or conquest. We fight because we refuse to give up. We fight because that is who we are." She turned back to her officers. "The galaxy thinks we are weak. They think we are foolish. By the time this is over, they will understand the truth. One ship is enough. One ship has always been enough. Because every human on board will give everything they have. And everything we have is more than the Kethrani can imagine." The Valor's engines roared to life, and the ship jumped into hyperspace. 312 souls headed toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The Tesserix Nebula was a cloud of purple and gold gas that stretched across 3 light years. It was beautiful in a cold, distant way, the kind of beauty that made travelers stop and stare. But on this day, no one was looking at the colors. All eyes were fixed on the battle that was about to begin. Admiral Zethrix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Varath dreadnought known as the Ironclaw. Around him, officers worked at their stations, monitoring the positions of over 2,000 Allied vessels. The coalition fleet had arranged itself in a classic formation, with heavy ships in the center and faster vessels on the flanks. It was a textbook deployment, the kind taught in military academies across the galaxy. Ahead of them, the Kethrani Armada waited. The enemy numbered approximately 1,000 warships, But size and numbers did not tell the whole story. Kethrani vessels were powered by quantum singularity cores, an exotic technology that no other species had been able to replicate. Their weapons could punch through shields that would stop conventional attacks. Their hulls were made from materials harvested from collapsed stars. Still, the Coalition had them outnumbered 2-1. By every reasonable calculation, victory was assured. Admiral Zethrix gave the order to attack. The Coalition fleet surged forward, thousands of engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Energy weapons lit up the void as the first salvos were exchanged. For a few glorious minutes, it seemed like the battle was going well. Kethrani ships exploded under the combined fire of dozens of allied vessels. The formation held steady, advancing meter by meter toward the enemy lines. Then the Kethrani revealed their trap. From hidden pockets of subspace, hundreds of additional enemy ships appeared. They materialized behind the Coalition fleet, cutting off the retreat and catching the Allied vessels in a deadly crossfire. The Kethrani had been hiding nearly half their force, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The battle turned into a massacre. Varith warships, famous for their thick armor and powerful guns, were torn apart by concentrated Kethrani fire. Their shields flickered and died within seconds. Their hulls buckled and cracked under the assault. Admiral Zethrix watched in horror as one of his finest vessels, a ship that had served the Empire for 200 years, broke in half and spilled its crew into the cold vacuum of space. The Ilmari fared no better. Their advanced technology, which they had boasted about so proudly, proved useless against the Kethrani quantum weapons. Their tactical computers, capable of calculating 1,000 scenarios per second, could not predict an enemy that did not follow conventional rules. Ship after ship fell silent as their crews died at their stations. Smaller vessels tried to flee, but the Kethrani gave no quarter. Fast attack ships ran down the retreating vessels like predators chasing wounded prey. Escape pods were destroyed before they could get clear. Medical frigates, clearly marked with the symbols of neutrality, were targeted and obliterated without hesitation. Admiral Zethrix ordered a full retreat, but it was too late. The Coalition formation had collapsed into chaos. Ships were scattered across the battlefield, each one fighting alone, each one dying alone. Communications were flooded with distress calls, pleas for help, and the final screams of dying crews. Within 6 hours, the Coalition had lost over 60% of its fleet. More than 1,000 ships were gone, reduced to twisted wreckage floating in the nebula. Millions of soldiers from dozens of species had died. The survivors limped away in whatever direction promised safety. Their dreams of easy victory shattered forever. Admiral Zethrix's flagship, the Ironclaw, was heavily damaged. Half his crew was dead. His weapons were offline. His engines were barely functional. He sat in his command chair, surrounded by the bodies of officers who had served him faithfully, and felt something he had never experienced before: despair. The Kethrani did not pursue the survivors. They did not need to. The Coalition was broken. The great alliance of 37 species had been humiliated in a single battle. There was no army left to stop the Dominion now. Then the sensors detected a new contact. Single ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the battlefield. It was small compared to the massive warships that had just been destroyed. Its design was simple, almost primitive by galactic standards. But it moved with a purpose, heading straight toward the Kethrani fleet without any sign of hesitation. Admiral Zethrix stared at the display, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Identify that vessel," he ordered. His sensor officer, wounded but still at her post, ran the scan twice to make sure. "It is a human warship, Admiral. The USS Valor. Registry shows a crew complement of 312. One ship. 312 humans. Against 900. Kathrani warships that had just destroyed the greatest fleet in galactic history. Admiral Zithrix felt a strange mixture of emotions. Respect for their courage, pity for their foolishness, and a small, unexpected spark of hope that he could not explain. He opened a communication channel to the human vessel. Human ship, this is Admiral Zithrix of the Varth Empire. You must retreat immediately. The coalition has fallen. There is no victory to be won here. Save yourselves while you still can. There was a moment of silence. Then a human voice came through the speakers. It was calm and steady, without any trace of fear. Admiral Zithrix, this is Commander Katie Morgan of the USS Valor. We appreciate your concern, but we will not be retreating today. Zithrix leaned forward in his chair. Commander, you do not understand. The Kathrani have weapons beyond anything you have faced. Your single ship cannot hope to survive against their fleet. This is not bravery. This is suicide. Another pause. When Katie spoke again, her voice was broadcast on an open channel so that every surviving ship, every species, every Kathrani vessel could hear her words. Admiral, I understand perfectly. I have seen the battle reports. I know what happened to your fleet, and I am sorry for your losses. But you are wrong about one thing. What is that? Zithrix asked. We did not come here for victory. We came here to teach. The communication ended. The USS Valor continued its approach. One small ship heading toward an armada of 900 warships that had just crushed the combined might of the galaxy. Admiral Zithrix watched the human vessel grow smaller on his display as it moved away from his crippled flagship. He did not know what the humans were planning. He did not understand their strategy. But for the first time since the battle began, he found himself wanting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the young species from the small blue planet knew something that the rest of the galaxy did not. Around him, the surviving coalition ships stopped their retreat. Damaged vessels turned their sensors toward the battlefield. Crews who had been preparing to flee gathered around their displays to watch. The entire galaxy held its breath as the USS Valor moved toward the Kathrani fleet. 312 humans against an empire that had never known defeat. It was madness. It was impossible. It was about to become the most legendary battle in history. Commander Katie Morgan stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. 900 red dots represented the Kathrani fleet. One blue dot represented the Valor. The math was simple and terrifying, but Katie was not thinking about the math. She was thinking about her crew. 312 men and women had followed her into this battle. Some were veterans who had served for decades. Others were young officers on their first deployment. All of them knew the odds. All of them had come anyway. That was what the galaxy did not understand about humans. They did not fight because victory was certain. They fought because giving up was unthinkable. Nathan, she said calmly, take us into the debris field. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Brooks nodded and relayed the order to the helm. The Valor changed course, heading toward the wreckage of the coalition fleet. Thousands of destroyed ships floated in the nebula, their broken hulls forming a maze of twisted metal and shattered hope. The Kathrani pursued. Of course they did. They had just destroyed the greatest fleet in the galaxy. One small human ship was nothing to them. Their commander probably saw this as an amusing diversion, a chance to add one more kill to an already impressive victory. That was their first mistake. The Valor slipped into the debris field like a fish disappearing into a coral reef. The broken hulls provided cover from enemy sensors. The floating wreckage blocked firing lines and created obstacles that larger ships could not easily navigate. The Kathrani sent 50 ships after them. These were fast vessels, built for hunting down stragglers and finishing off wounded prey. They entered the debris field in a standard search pattern, confident that finding one small ship would be a simple task. Nathan watched them on his display, tracking their movements with cold precision. They are spreading out to cover more area. Classic search formation. Katie nodded. Wait until they are fully committed. The crew worked in tense silence. Every station was manned. Every system was ready. The air on the bridge felt heavy with anticipation. Now, Katie said. The Valor erupted from behind the wreckage of a destroyed Ilmari cruiser, weapons blazing. Twin plasma cannons targeted the nearest Kithrani ship, punching through its shields with surgical precision. The enemy vessel exploded before its crew even knew they were under attack. Nathan directed fire to the next target, then the next. His mind worked faster than any computer, calculating angles and distances with an instinct born from years of training. 3 more Kithrani ships died in the first 30 seconds. The enemy tried to regroup, but the debris field worked against them. Their formation was scattered. Their communications were disrupted by interference from the destroyed ships around them. They could not coordinate an effective response. The Valor moved through the wreckage like a ghost, appearing and disappearing with terrifying speed. One moment it would be on the port side, unleashing a devastating barrage. The next moment it would vanish behind a piece of debris, only to appear somewhere completely unexpected. Scott Palmer kept the engines running at levels that should have been impossible. He pushed the reactor past every safety limit, rerouting power from non-essential systems to weapons and shields. When a conduit overloaded, he was already there with a repair kit. When a system failed, he found a workaround before the bridge even noticed the problem. Shields at 60%, he reported from engineering. We can keep this up for another hour, maybe 2 if I get creative. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Laura Hendricks was already treating the first casualties. A plasma burst had breached one of the outer compartments, and 3 crew members had been caught in the explosion. Burns covered their bodies. One of them was not breathing. Laura did not panic. She had seen worse. She stabilized the critical patient with practiced efficiency, then moved to the next. Her nurses followed her lead, working with calm determination even as the ship shook from enemy fire. Back on the bridge, Nathan reported the results of their first engagement. 40 Kithrani vessels destroyed. We lost 4 crew members and suffered minor hull damage. Katie absorbed the information without emotion. 4 people gone. 4 families who would receive terrible news. But the math had shifted, if only slightly. The Kithrani commander was no longer amused. He sent 200 more ships into the debris field, determined to overwhelm the human vessel with sheer numbers. The Valor, adapted. Katie ordered maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. Hard turns at maximum thrust. Sudden acceleration followed by even more sudden stops. Movements that subjected the crew to forces that would kill most species. But humans were different. Their bodies could endure punishment that other races could not imagine. They had evolved. On a harsh planet, surviving ice ages and predators and 1,000 other challenges. Their tolerance for pain, for stress, for physical extremes was unlike anything else in the galaxy. The crew gritted their teeth and held on. Some of them bled from the nose or ears. Some of them passed out briefly and woke up moments later, still at their stations. None of them stopped fighting. The Kithrani could not keep up. Their bodies were not built for such punishment. Their pilots hesitated at crucial moments, unwilling to push their vessels to the same extremes. That hesitation cost them again and again. 60 more Kithrani ships fell, then 80. Then over 100 intercepted communications from the enemy fleet revealed growing confusion. The Kithrani could not understand what they were facing. Their tactical computers analyzed the Valor's movements and declared them impossible. Their commanders issued orders that were outdated before they could be executed. One transmission was particularly telling. A Kethrani captain, his voice filled with fear, reported to his superiors. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like survivors. Every time we corner them, they find a way out. Every time we think we have them, they attack from a direction we did not expect. I've never seen anything like this. The Valor emerged from the debris field after 2 hours of combat. Its hull was scarred with burn marks. One of its secondary weapons arrays was destroyed, but it was still fighting, still moving, still dangerous. Behind it, the wreckage of over 200 Kethrani ships drifted among the remains of the Coalition fleet. Katie looked at her exhausted crew and felt a surge of pride. They had done what the entire galaxy thought was impossible. They had hurt the Kethrani. They had made them bleed, but the battle was not over. 700 enemy ships still waited in formation. The Valor had won a small victory, but the war was far from finished. Nathan studied the enemy fleet on his display. They are regrouping. The commander is consolidating his forces around the flagship. He is not going to underestimate us again. Katie nodded slowly. Her eyes found the largest ship in the enemy formation, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed everything around it. The Throne of Silence. It was the command vessel of the Kethrani invasion fleet, the symbol of their dominion. Then we will have to give him something else to worry about, she said. Set a course for the flagship. We are going to cut off the head of the snake. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. They both knew what that order meant. The Throne of Silence was protected by hundreds of escort ships. Getting close enough to attack, it would be almost impossible. Getting away afterward would be even harder. But Nathan did not argue. He simply nodded and began plotting the course. The Valor turned toward the heart of the enemy fleet. 312 humans, minus those they had already lost, headed toward certain death with their heads held high. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. And slowly and possibly, hope began to spread. The Throne of Silence was not just a ship. It was a monument to Kethrani power. The dreadnought measured nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was covered with weapon platforms, each one capable of destroying a smaller vessel with a single shot. Its shields were powered by 3 separate quantum singularity cores, making it nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. Hundreds of escort ships surrounded it in layered defensive formations. Commander Katie Morgan studied the fortress of metal and fire that stood between her and victory. Every tactical analysis said the same thing. The Valor could not reach the flagship. The Valor could not survive the approach. The Valor could not win this fight. Katie had stopped listening to tactical analyses hours ago. All hands, she announced over the ship's intercom. This is the commander. In a few minutes, we are going to attempt something that has never been done before. We are going to attack the Kethrani flagship directly. I will not lie to you. Many of us will not survive. But if we succeed, we will break the enemy's spirit and give the galaxy a chance to recover. She paused, letting her words sink in. You have already done the impossible today. You have shown the Kethrani what it means to face humanity in battle. Now I am asking you to do it one more time. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because there are billions of people counting on us. Because we are the only ones who can do this. Because we are human, and this is what we do. The response came immediately. From every deck, every station, every corner of the ship, voices called out their readiness. No one hesitated. No one asked for more time. They were ready. Nathan, Katie said, begin the attack run. The Valor surged forward, engines burning at maximum power. Scott Palmer had pushed the reactor beyond anything the designers had ever intended. Warning lights flashed across every control panel. The hull groaned under the stress. None of it mattered. The escort ships opened fire. Space around the Valor became a storm of energy beams and plasma bursts. The shields absorbed hit after hit, their power dropping with each impact. 20%, 15%, 10%. Nathan returned fire with everything they had. His targeting was flawless, his timing perfect. Escort ships exploded or spun away damaged, but for every one they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The first hull breach came when the shields finally failed on the port side. A plasma burst punched through the outer armor and detonated inside one of the crew quarters. 7 people died instantly. The compartment was sealed before the atmosphere could escape, but the damage was done. More breaches followed. The Valor was being torn apart piece by piece. Fires broke out in 3 different sections. Power fluctuated as conduits overloaded and failed. In engineering, Scott Palmer worked like a man possessed. His hands moved faster than thought, rerouting power, sealing breaches, keeping the ship alive through sheer willpower. When a critical relay exploded next to him, he ignored the burns on his arms and kept working. In the medical bay, Dr. Laura Hendricks was overwhelmed with casualties. Wounded crew members filled every bed, every chair, every inch of available space. She moved from patient to patient, making impossible choices about who could be saved and who could not. A young ensign named Ryan Carter was stationed near one of the damaged plasma conduits on Deck 7. The conduit was about to fail, and if it did, the resulting explosion would destroy the entire section and kill everyone inside. Ryan saw the danger before anyone else. Without thinking, without hesitation, he grabbed the conduit with his bare hands and held it together. The superheated material burned through his gloves instantly. Pain shot through his body like lightning. He could smell his own flesh cooking, but he did not let go. "Get out!" He screamed at the other crew members in the section. "Move! Now!" They ran. Every single one of them made it to safety before Ryan finally collapsed, his hands ruined beyond recognition. The repair team arrived seconds later and sealed the conduit properly. Ryan had saved 12 lives at the cost of his own future. On the bridge, Katie received reports of casualties mounting throughout the ship. 20 dead, then 40, then 60. Each number was a person she had known, a life she had been responsible for. But the Valor kept moving. The dreadnought was getting closer. "We are entering the flagship's defensive perimeter," Nathan reported. His voice was steady despite the chaos around them. 30 seconds to weapons range. Katie nodded. "Prepare the boarding party." Deep in the ship's hangar, Sergeant Megan Torres gathered her Marines. There were only 24 of them left from an original complement of 40. The rest had been killed or wounded in the battle. But the survivors were the best humanity had to offer, hardened veterans who had faced death before and were not afraid to face it again. "Listen up," Megan said. "Our job is simple. We board the flagship, reach the reactor core, and plant the charges. Then we get out before the whole thing blows. Any questions?" One of the younger Marines raised his hand. "Sergeant, what are our chances of making it back?" Megan looked at him for a long moment. "Honestly, not good. But we are not doing this for ourselves. We are doing this for everyone else. For the people back home. For the people who died in this battle. For everyone who is counting on us to finish the job." She checked her weapon one final time. "Now get to the boarding craft. We launch in 60 seconds." The Valor reached the dreadnought and attached itself to the massive ship's hull like a remora clinging to a whale. The boarding craft launched immediately, carrying Megan and her Marines across the short distance to the enemy vessel. They breached the hull using shaped charges and poured inside. The interior of the Throne of Silence was vast and dark, filled with corridors that stretched for hundreds of meters. Kithrani warriors waited for them at every turn. The fighting was brutal. Kithrani soldiers stood over 2 meters tall, with thick carapaces and claws that could tear through standard armor. They were fearsome opponents, bred for combat and trained to never retreat. But the Marines did not retreat either. They fought hand-to-hand in the narrow corridors, using knives when their guns ran dry, using fists when their knives broke. The Kethrani had never faced an enemy like this. Other species calculated odds and withdrew when the situation became hopeless. Humans kept fighting. Magan lost 8 Marines in the first 10 minutes. Then 4 more. But the survivors pushed forward, step by bloody step, toward the reactor core. She killed a Kethrani warrior with her bare hands when her weapon jammed. She took a claw across her ribs that would have killed a lesser person. She kept moving. Finally, impossibly, they reached the core. The reactor chamber was enormous, filled with pulsing energy that lit up the darkness. Megan planted the charges with practiced efficiency while her remaining Marines held off the Kethrani reinforcements flooding into the room. "Charges set," she reported over her communicator. "Detonation in 3 minutes. We are coming back." The retreat was even harder than the advance. Kethrani warriors seemed to appear from every shadow, every doorway, every corner. The Marines fought their way back to the boarding craft, leaving a trail of dead enemies behind them. Megan was the last one aboard. She had been shot twice and stabbed once, and she was losing blood fast. But she refused to fall until the craft was clear of the dreadnought. The Valor detached from the enemy ship and pulled away at maximum speed. Behind them, the Throne of Silence began to shudder as the charges reached their detonation sequence. The explosion was visible across the entire battlefield. The dreadnought's reactor went critical, unleashing a wave of energy that consumed not only the flagship, but 90 of the escort ships surrounding it. The Kethrani command structure collapsed instantly. Without their flagship, without their commander, the enemy fleet fell into chaos. Ships began retreating in every direction, no longer a unified force, but a scattered mob fleeing for survival. On the bridge of the Valor, Katie allowed herself a single moment of relief. They had done it. Against all odds, against every calculation, they had won. Then she looked at the casualty reports and felt the weight of victory settle on her shoulders. Over 100 of her crew were dead. The ship was barely holding together. They had paid a terrible price for this day, but the price had been worth it. The Kethrani Dominion would never recover from this defeat, and the galaxy would never forget what humanity had accomplished. The Kethrani fleet was running. Ships that had once moved with the confidence of conquerors, now scattered like frightened animals. They jumped to hyperspace in random directions, desperate to escape the battlefield before the humans could catch them. Formation discipline had collapsed completely. Commanders who had expected easy victory were now focused only on survival. The USS Valor held position at the center of the battlefield, surrounded by the wreckage of the greatest military engagement in galactic history. Atmosphere leaked from a dozen breaches in its hull. Emergency lights flickered in corridors filled with smoke and debris. The ship looked like it had been through a war because it had. Commander Katie Morgan watched the enemy retreat on her damaged tactical display. Fewer than 500 Kethrani ships remained from an original force of nearly 1,000. The rest were dead, destroyed by a single human vessel and its crew of 312 souls. She activated the communication system one final time. "Kethrani fleet," she said, her voice carrying across every frequency. "This is Commander Katie Morgan of the USS Valor. Tell your empire what you saw today. Tell them about the one ship that came for you when no one else would. Tell them about the humans who refused to die." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And tell them this. We have millions more. Today you faced 300. Tomorrow you might face 300,000. Or 3 million. It does not matter, because every single one of us will fight the same way we fought today. with everything we have, until our last breath, until our last heartbeat. That is what it means to be human. The transmission ended. The surviving Kethrani ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying her message to every corner of their empire. In the hours that followed, the surviving coalition vessels slowly returned to the battlefield. Damaged ships limped back from their scattered retreats. Rescue craft searched the wreckage for survivors. Medical frigates arrived to treat the wounded. Admiral Zethrix was among the first to reach the Valor. His own flagship was barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and the determination of his remaining crew. But he had to see the human ship with his own eyes. He had to understand what had happened. The shuttle bay of the Valor was a disaster zone. Scorch marks covered the walls. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Wounded crew members sat against bulkheads, receiving treatment from exhausted medical personnel. But through all the destruction, the humans were still working, still fighting to save their ship and each other. Admiral Zethrix found Commander Morgan on the bridge, coordinating repair efforts while simultaneously managing a dozen different crises. She looked exhausted. Blood stained her uniform from wounds she had not bothered to treat. But her eyes were sharp, and her voice was steady. "Admiral," she said when she saw him, "thank you for coming." Zethrix looked around the damaged bridge, at the humans working tirelessly at stations that sparked and smoked, at the bodies that had been moved to the side, but not yet removed. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you do this? How did one ship accomplish what 2,000 could not?" Katie considered the question for a long moment. Behind her, Scott Palmer was crawling under a console to repair a damaged power relay. Dr. Lara Hendricks was treating a wounded officer who refused to leave his post. Nathan Brooks was running calculations for emergency repairs that would take days to complete. "Admiral," Katie said, "you assembled the greatest fleet in galactic history. Your ships were magnificent. Your technology was advanced. Your commanders were experienced. But you made one mistake." "What mistake?" "You counted ships. You calculated numbers. You assumed that more vessels meant more power." She shook her head slowly. "But war is not about numbers. It is about will. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice, what you are willing to endure, what you are willing to do when everything seems lost." She gestured at her crew working around them. These people did not come here expecting to survive. They came here knowing they might die. And they came anyway. Not because they were ordered to. Not because they had no choice. But because they understood that some things are worth dying for. Admiral Zethrix looked at the humans with new eyes. He saw the young ensign with bandaged hands who had nearly burned alive to save his companions. He saw the engineer who had pushed his body past every limit to keep the ship running. He saw the medical officer who had not slept in over 20 hours but refused to rest while patients still needed her. "We do not send ships," Katie continued. "We send humans. Every single one of us carries the entire weight of our species. We fight not because we expect to win, but because we refuse to lose. One ship is enough because one human is never truly alone. They carry all of us with them." Zethrix was silent for a long time. Finally, he bowed his head in a gesture of deep respect. "I have been a warrior for over 300 years, he said. "I have fought in dozens of battles. I have seen courage and cowardice, victory and defeat. But I have never witnessed anything like what you accomplished today. Your species has taught me something I thought I already knew." "What is that?" Katie asked. "That the spirit of a warrior is not measured by the weapons they carry or the ships they command. It is measured by their willingness to stand when others would fall." He looked at her with something approaching reverence. "The Vorath will never mock humanity again. And I will make sure the rest of the galaxy understands what we learned here today. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every species had heard the story of the USS Valor. They learned about Commander Morgan and her impossible attack on the Kethrani flagship. They heard about the Marines who fought their way through the enemy dreadnought. They discovered the truth about the one ship that had changed everything. The Kethrani Dominion withdrew from all contested territories. Their military power was broken, but more importantly, their confidence was shattered. They had believed themselves invincible. They had conquered 12 star systems without ever facing a real challenge. Now they knew the truth. Now they knew what waited for them if they ever tried to expand again. The Galactic Council convened a special session to honor the crew of the Valor. Representatives from every member species rose to speak. They praised human courage. They marveled at human determination. They apologized for underestimating the young species from the small blue planet. Daniel Price, the human ambassador who had been laughed at just weeks earlier, stood at the same speaking platform where he had announced humanity's contribution to the coalition. "We did not seek glory," he said. "We did not ask for recognition. We simply did what humans have always done. We stood up when others sat down. We moved forward when others retreated. We refused to accept defeat when every calculation said we should surrender." He looked around the vast chamber at the thousands of delegates listening in respectful silence. One ship was all we needed, because one ship was all we ever intended to send. Not because we lack resources, not because we lack courage, but because we wanted the galaxy to understand something important about humanity. We are not the strongest species. We are not the oldest. We do not have the best technology or the biggest fleets. But we have something that cannot be measured or calculated. We have the will to endure. We have the spirit to fight. We have the determination to never, ever give up. He smiled slightly. "The next time trouble comes to this galaxy, and it will come, remember what you saw today. Remember the Valor. Remember the 312 humans who stood against an empire. And remember that whenever the darkness rises, humanity will be there to meet it. One ship at a time." The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for nearly 10 minutes. In the years that followed, whenever a new threat emerged, whenever a crisis demanded action, the first question every species asked was simple: will the humans send a ship? The answer was always the same. One ship was all they had ever needed.